This is part 3 of the audio story, Attack on Baywa City. You can find part 1 and 2, as well as many more stories on our channel. The two frightened humans stood right in front of the monster girl's gigantic face. Nova smiled. Sorry, she said, not yet realizing she could understand the axolotl-giantess perfectly. Wait. Grandpa, she said, looking towards Nolder, did your translation software work that quickly? He nodded, gently rubbing Nova's head. Of course, he said. I've installed it on that bracelet she's wearing on her wrist, so she can understand us, and we can understand her. The three shared their names amongst themselves, with Nova still admiring Lyxe's beauty. She wasn't sure how to admit it, but she was the slightest bit flustered, too caught up in the appearance of the axolotl. Finally, however, the time for the most important question came. Something Nova couldn't help feeling the slightest bit nervous about, so Nolder said, "What exactly brings you here?" Lyxe looked up at one of the buildings, lifting her head slowly. Well, she said, one of my friends, Ryung. She's a giantess, like me. Lyxe lowered her head back down with a smile, a look of sincerity on her face. She told me about human cities before, of course. I had never been in one, and when I saw this, well. Lyxe sighed softly, being careful once more to not blow the two away. I thought this city was little more than an automated process. I couldn't help feeling upset about the idea of humans destroying their beautiful landscapes to create such an ugly factory, for whatever reason. So I suppose I got a little carried away. I apologize, if I knew it was actually inhabited, I promise I wouldn't have done all of this. Nova nods. Don't worry, Lyxe, she said softly, I knew from the moment I woke up that you had no ill intentions. Someone as pure as you could never mean to harm anyone, after all. Lyxe smiled at the notion, gently nodding her head. Thank you for understanding, she whispered. Suddenly, a massive explosion rang out behind Lyxe's back, cutting their heartfelt introduction short. Lyxe's body instinctively whipped back around to see what was happening, and she saw a much larger ship. It was large enough for her to actually make out what it was this time, and she knew that it was dangerous. Before she could so much as react, the battleship launched out a myriad of rockets aimed at Lyxe. Luckily, her bracelet deflected the rockets, rendering them completely useless. Still, she knew staying here wasn't safe, not for her, or her new friends. Without any hesitation, she leaned her body back down, setting her hand down on the ground. Hop on, she said, raising her voice the slightest bit. Nova and Nolder looked at each other, and Nova nodded. Come on, she said, jumping onto Lyxe's hand. She'll keep us safe. I know she will. Nolder seemed hesitant at first, but slowly made his way onto Lyxe's hand. Please, he said, looking up towards Lyxe, don't let anything happen. She nodded and began to walk further into the city, though she wanted to be more careful. Lyxe knew that she didn't presently have a choice. She ran through the city with Nolder and Nova in her hand, looking for any place they may potentially be safe. She stepped on countless people and cars as she ran throughout the city, though she didn't have the time to apologize now. She needed to keep herself and her new friends out of harm's way. The streets instantly panicked as her gigantic purple feet kept thundering down and crushing everything. People ran and screamed for their lives, but each fell silent as they were squished into the roadway under Lyxe's swift footsteps. Nova slowly bent down to the axolotl's hand, rubbing her own against it. It was unlike anything she had felt before, a mixture of a slight slimy texture with a bit of firmness. She smiled at the feeling, glad to have experienced everything she had to this point with the axolotl. Lyxe looked down at her as she did this, a smile on her face. When Nova looked up, her eyes met with Lyxe. The girl blushed lightly and smiled. Sorry, she said with a chuckle. I'm not used to being in someone's hands. Lyxe smiled and nodded. Don't worry, she said, I'll make sure you're all safe. Nova nodded and went back to rubbing Lyxe's hand against her own, still curious just what made the axolotl's skin so different from her own. During this, the military still continued to shoot at Lyxe. She had managed to narrowly avoid each shot to this point. Luckily, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was seconds away from being shot at any given moment. The continued firing from the weapon was causing more destruction than Lyxe had herself, and, though she knew it wasn't her fault, a part of her almost felt shameful. Nova seemed to notice this and called up to Lyxe once more. "This isn't your fault," she said. "If we can get closer to them, then maybe we can." She sighed softly and shook her head. "We just need to convince them that you're not here to hurt anyone. There are countless people that you stepped on unknowingly that survived, right?" Lyxe hesitated for a moment but nodded. She knew that the girl was right. After all, she didn't intend to cause the damage she had to this point, and everything that was being caused now was at the hands of the military. Unfortunately, this realization wasn't helping her at all. With the beams still being shot her way, with each passing moment, they began to come closer and closer to her. Just as she had feared, one of the beams nearly managed to hit Lyxe's body, radiating an energy shield from the bracelet just before it could. The bracelet let out a feedback impulse, shooting outwards towards the ship, sending it slowly crashing down into the nearby swamp. While Lyxe breathed a slight sigh of relief, she quickly realized something that would prove to be a major issue. Whether it was their goal or not, the military managed to destroy the shield emitter of Lyxe's bracelet. The only thing protecting herself, and the residents of the city, was now gone. Lyxe let out a shocked sigh as she looked down at her arm, trying to figure out just what she was going to do without it. She felt the movements under her bare soles and knew that people wouldn't be able to survive it for long. With her tail, she gently pushed many people on the streets out of the way, to have enough space for her, but she carefully sat down and lifted her feet. "What's happening?" Nova asked, noticing the worried expression on the monster girl's face. Lyxe took a deep breath and then explained quietly, "My shield generator was destroyed. People have no protection anymore. I have to be careful not to kill anyone. Your bodies are so small and fragile." She examined the soles of her feet and was both shocked and relieved. Relieved because nobody seemed to have been crushed to a pulp. But she was shocked because most of those sticking people were seriously injured. Many had broken bones or crushed limbs. They needed medical attention fast. Very slowly and carefully, she pecked the injured from the soles of her feet. Some cried in pain, others were already unconscious. Lyxe had tears running down her cheeks as she saw how much people suffered because of her. "I am so sorry. I didn't want that. I'm such a chump." Nolder and Nova also got down from her hand and somehow tried to help the injured. Luckily, ambulances and helicopters arrived after only a few minutes, while Lyxe was still busy detaching several people from her bare soles. As she removed them all and the brave rescue teams tended to the injured, Lyxe looked down at Nova. "I'm so sorry. I almost turned those poor people into stains. That must have hurt like hell. I hope everyone will survive." Her heart was pounding with worry. Nova didn't know what to say. Even old Nolder was speechless. The two just stood shocked in front of the gigantic feet of the monster girl. Lyxe wiped tears from her face. "Anyway, I need to get out of town quickly before someone dies because of me. Can you help me?" With her shield emitter destroyed, she knew she had to be much more careful. Anyone that she mistakenly stepped on wouldn't survive the ordeal now, and she wanted to do anything and everything she could to avoid that happening. The two humans nodded. "Of course, Lyxe," Nova said with a smile on her face. "We will help as best we can." "What should we do?" Lyxe found her smile again. "Thank you," she said. "But it's going to be dangerous, you should know that. I have to walk across town back to the swamp. But because there are still a lot of people walking around here, I need someone to tell people what to do. And warn me before I make a mistake. Lyxe explained to Nova and Nolder what she expected of them, and they nervously agreed. Only moments later did they find themselves on the back of the giantess's feet, directly in front of her toes, so that they could look down on the road from above their toes and see everything. Nolder had borrowed a police officer's megaphone and was hoping he'd manage to somehow hold on while he used that thing. Lyxe looked at her feet and had to grin when she saw the tiny ones on her toes. Are you comfortable down there? Nova gave a thumbs up, which Lyxe could barely see, but she saw the arm movement and took it for a yes. All right. Then hold on tight, I'm going back towards the harbor now. Watch out, I'm taking a step. Lyxe lifted the foot Nova was sitting on and took a slow step forward. The girl clung to the rough skin of her toe to keep from slipping. As the giant foot landed, the ground shook and Nova felt the tremendous roar beneath her. It was an amazing feeling. Even though she was scared, she had to admit that she was having the time of her life. Lyxe made her way back towards the harbor after this, nervous about just what was to come. The few remaining citizens ran around the city in fear as Lyxe approached them, not sure of how to react to the giant axolotl coming towards them. Just as Lyxe asked, Nolder and Nova tried to shout down to them as best as they could, to tell them that they were still safe, that Lyxe wouldn't hurt them, but that they all had to get out of the way. Luckily, most people reacted positively upon hearing these reassuring words from the two people. Unfortunately, not everyone reacted that way. Some continued to run around in panic. Some so blinded by fear that they ran under Lyxe's foot. As she was about to step down, she felt several bodies beneath the balls of her feet and between her toes. Wait. There are still people there. Nolder shouted from below. Lyxe withdrew her foot, startled. Oh my goodness. I will definitely crush a lot of people. What should I do? She said nervously. Nolder waved angrily at people on the street. Hey, you there. Go away. Or are you tired of life? The people who nearly had been crushed were obviously so shocked that they immediately responded to Nolder's instructions, and quickly ran away from under the huge foot. Relieved, Nolder turned around and called up to the gigantic Lyxe, all clear down here. You can make the next step. Slowly and carefully, the axolotl monster lowered her foot. Are you sure? Yes. Certainly. Don't worry Lyxe, you can do it. Nova encouraged. Lyxe took a deep breath. Some time ago Ruing had explained to her a stepping technique with which she was able to step on small creatures without crushing them. She had always wondered why that was important at all. But now she fully understood. She tried to remember what Ruing taught her and continued her slow walk. She carefully took one step after the other and made sure not to step on any of the fleeing people. Nolder and Nova also kept their eyes open and tried to calm people down. This worked relatively well until a little boy panicked at the sight of Lyxe and ran into the street. The mother tried to stop him and ran after him. The renewed screams of fear triggered panic among other people. A chain reaction. The giantess's purple foot was already touching down, pinning a few people to the ground. Lyxe felt a crunch under the sole of her foot and winced. But she just kept going, concentrating on not putting too much weight on her foot. She took the next step when the road was clear. Then she lifted the foot the people were under and took a look at her footprint. Inside were a few injured, but apparently no one was crushed to pulp. But she had to assume that a few more people had stuck to her sole. So she hovered her foot over another group of people and asked them. Hey, you down there? Don't worry. I won't crush you. But could you please check if some people are sticking to my sole? If yes, can you help them? I will be very careful to not hurt you while you are beneath my foot, I promise. Most just ran away. Others hesitated but finally decided to help. Lyxe felt the movement beneath her bare foot with satisfaction. When everyone seemed safe, she finally moved on again. Phew, that's not easy here. But luckily we made it right away. A few more steps and we are at the port. Just before reaching the harbor, Lyxe encountered another panicked crowd blocking the road. Nolder and Nova desperately tried to calm people down, but most of them probably didn't believe the story about the friendly monster. The townsfolk murmured amongst themselves as a loud crash rang throughout the city, finally drawing their attention away from Lyxe, even if only for a moment. What was that? Nova shouted out. Nolder shook his head and sighed, pointing towards a swamp on the outskirts of the city. There, he said. The ship that was determined to take Lyxe down. It seems to have crashed. He looked up towards Lyxe, a look of concern on his face. Unfortunately, the energy reaction from Lyxe's bracelet being destroyed was enough to overload the weapon's reactors. The ship was sent barreling into a nearby swamp, sinking down into the murky water. Countless soldiers barged their way out of the ship, pushing and shoving their way out to ensure that they would be able to make it to safety. They couldn't help but wonder if the beast they were fighting was privy to what happened to the ship, or if it was truly an accident. Still, they had no time to argue amongst themselves. Their top priority needed to be their survival. The soldiers waded through the swamp as best as they could manage. Most of them barely able to stay afloat on their own. Just as they had given up all hope, they saw the giant axolotl quickly swimming towards them with two people on its back. Lyxe, Nolder said, his words still being translated by the translation device. I overheard one of the soldiers talking on the street about that ship, what they planned to do with it before we found you. Lyxe nodded, curious about what he had to say. The reactor in the ship, he continued, it's going to explode sooner rather than later. I'm not sure why they designed it like that, he said, if it was a design flaw, or perhaps something meant as a means of getting rid of any problems they're not able to rid the world of themselves without issues. In either case, we need to do something to save the people of the city. Is there anything you can do? She nodded, lowering her voice to a whisper. I can deal with it, she said. It may be risky, but I need to do anything I can to prevent any more destruction. All of this is my fault in a sense, she said with a soft sigh. So it's the right thing to do. Nolder nodded, gently rubbing Lyxe. Thank you, he said. Even in the swamp, she was able to swim with a precision unlike anything Nolder and Nova had seen before. If they were in a better situation, it would have been amazing to just watch her, to see just how far she would be able to swim without any issues at all. Along the way, Lyxe picked up the few soldiers she could find still trying to get to shore. Nolder and Nova explained the situation to them, telling them that Lyxe didn't intend to hurt anyone, that it was all a misunderstanding. Most of them seemed to be accepting, considering that their lives had just been saved, any of those that weren't simply keeping quiet and looking the other way. Nolder and Nova were silent, sharing a disapproving look between themselves towards those that still refused to believe Lyxe was willing to help. Eventually, Nova had enough. She went up to one of the soldiers that was complaining, despite Nolder warning her to keep her feelings to herself, and began to explain everything that had happened to that point. She informed him that Lyxe had no ill intentions, and that everything that had happened wasn't truly her fault, that it was all a massive misunderstanding. At first, they seemed reluctant to listen to the girl. They hadn't experienced what she had, after all, but Nova realized what would help sway them. I was stepped on myself, you know, Nova said. Lyxe looked away for a moment, feeling bad for what she had unintentionally done. But, she continued, I survived. It doesn't make any sense, I know. But I survived. Lyxe was delighted to hear her new friend sticking up for her. She, of course, felt nervous, worrying that it may be too much for the girl to handle on her own, but she couldn't help but smile. She continued to gently pick up the remaining soldiers in the swamp, feeling a burst of inspiration from Nova's words. After Nova's speech, so to speak, the other soldiers joined in on encouraging Lyxe, some even thanking her for saving them. You can do it, Lyxe, Nova said, gently rubbing the axolotl's head. Only a few soldiers remained in the swamp at this point, most of which still seemed hesitant to accept Lyxe's help. Still, none of them fought back in any sense, accepting that it was a life and death situation either way. The soldiers all talked amongst themselves on the slimy back of the axolotl, still debating whether or not they made the right choice. Nova looked over towards one of the soldiers, a slightly stern look on her face. "Is that everyone?" The man looked around for a moment, nodded. "I believe so," he said. Lyxe nodded in satisfaction, clutching the ship in her legs and using her long tail to propel herself forward. She dragged the large, damaged battleship behind her through the swamp until she was sure she was far enough from town. "Good," Nova shouted. "Now, Lyxe," she said nervously, "let's get back to the city. We need to make sure everyone stays safe." Lyxe nodded and began to swim back towards the city, picking up her speed to ensure they made it out in time. Just as they made it back to the harbor, the ship exploded far away, deep within the recesses of the swamp. Lyxe, Nolder and Nova let out a soft sigh of relief as they realized they had succeeded in saving the townsfolk, even if it meant putting themselves in harm's way once more to resolve the issue. With the ship finally dealt with, the few townsfolk that were nearby seemed to finally accept Lyxe, at least somewhat. She could still feel the occasional glare against her, so she knew that there were at least a handful of people that didn't appreciate her presence. But, even so, she felt mostly content with what she was able to accomplish. Lyxe wanted to stay behind to help the humans rebuild the city, to try and fix the mayhem she indirectly caused, but she knew it was too high of a risk. Even though some of the humans seemed to regard her with much more respect than they had when she first arrived, she knew her presence would cause more harm than good. Without her bracelet, she wanted nothing more than to help, but with her size, it seemed to her that it wasn't an option. Lyxe looked down at the bracelet with a sad face. Nova watched her with a slight sadness on her face too, wanting to comfort the axolotl, but she wasn't sure what to say or do in her present situation. Is there anything at all that I can do?" Lyxe asked in a soft whisper. Nolder and Nova looked at each other, seemingly pondering something. "Well," Nolder said, "your bracelet. Is it reparable?" Lyxe shook her head. "If it is, it wouldn't be able to be fixed here," she said with a soft sigh. "I apologize. It would take too long to repair in the first place to make it worthwhile." He sighed and nodded. "Unfortunately," he said, "there may not be much that you can do here." "But..." Nolder looked up at her with a soft smile. "Your portal," he continued, "do you think it would still work?" Lyxe looked away for a second and eventually nodded. "Grandpa," Nova said, "if she has to go back home, then I want to go with her. I can teach her about humans and help her for when she comes back." Nolder shook his head. "Nova," he said, "I don't feel safe sending you alone to somewhere neither of us are familiar with." "Even if she could keep you safe," he said, looking up towards Lyxe, "it's too dangerous. You might get hurt, and if her bracelet isn't able to protect you, there's no knowing what might happen. And your parents would kill me if I let you go. They expect me to protect you." Nova wanted to contest him. She felt she could protect herself, and that she could truly help Lyxe. After all, she was the one that caught on to her being friendly in the first place. Still, a part of her felt that her grandfather may have been right. She looked back towards Lyxe and her grandfather, both of them giving her a slightly upset look. "If I go with her," she said, "I know I may not be able to return. But if there's even a chance," she looked up towards Lyxe and smiled, "then I want to be able to help her grow more accustomed to our world. So if she does come back..." Nova sighed softly, still trying to find the words to say. "If she does come back, then maybe I can help her be more accepted." Nolder seemed to almost consider it for a moment. He looked up towards Lyxe and back towards Nova, seemingly wondering if it was the right course of action. "Nova," he said, "it's..." He let out a soft sigh and rubbed the girl's shoulder. "It's too dangerous. There's no telling what will happen out there, and if word gets out that a human went back with her, who knows how people will interpret it. Although she didn't want to admit it, Nolder had a point. The majority of the other residents of the city had already reacted fairly negatively to Lyxe's presence, those that didn't realize she harbored no ill intentions, at least. And it was clear to her that even something as simple as one person disappearing would likely cause even more harm than any potential good. She eventually gave in. "You're right, Grandpa," she sighed. "Lyxe," she said, "just stay safe. And promise you'll come back someday. Okay? I'll stay behind to make sure everyone knows you only have good intentions, so next time you come back, you'll be met with open arms." Lyxe smiled at Nova, grateful for what the girl intended to do for her. Though Nova didn't want to see her go, she knew it was for the best for Lyxe. She yelled out to the titaness, telling her once more to visit her whenever she can. Lyxe smiled down at the girl and nodded happily, whispering softly to her. "Don't worry," she said, "I'll visit you soon." "Thank you. Thank you for everything. Both of you." Lyxe walked into the portal, smiling back towards Nolder and Nova once more as she slowly faded from their field of vision. Her two new friends, of course, stayed behind, intending to help fix the destruction that Lyxe had unintentionally caused, and hopefully sway the views of the townsfolk back into her favor, choosing to start with the military members that she had saved, hoping they'd be willing to help their cause. The end. This was part 3 of the story, Attack on Baywa City. This part of the story was written by Zentiano, also known as Valentine. The story was slightly adjusted for the audio version and more scenes were added. We hope you've enjoyed the story so far. For more stories featuring Lyxe, the giant Axolotl-Kaiju, and other characters, please subscribe to our channel. Also check out our main channel for videos featuring the gentle mega giantess Ryung. Of course, we are happy about a like and comments, and if you want to support our work and help us to produce more videos or stories, check out our Patreon page. The link is in the description. Thanks for listening.